Paris in July 1793 was a furnace of suspicion. The air itself seemed to tremble, heavy with the metallic scent of blood and ink. The revolution, once a promise of light, had become a machinery of vengeance, grinding friend and foe alike. The guillotine no longer shocked, it comforted. It whispered that justice was still alive, even as it devoured the living. In this fevered city walked a young woman who carried no banner, no musket, no army, only a single conviction, and the weapon it demanded. Her name was Charlotte Corday, and by the end of the month her name would be written in both reverence and fear. She was born Marie-Anne Charlotte Corday d'Armont in Normandy, raised amid quiet fields and the crumbling dignity of a fallen aristocracy. Her childhood was marked by silence and scripture, shaped by convent walls where the world outside seemed distant and harmless. But when the revolution came, it tore through the country like a storm through glass. The church bells that once marked prayer now rang for executions. Nobility and clergy fled, peasants turned executioners, and words like freedom and virtue were spoken with blood still dripping from the blade. In the ruins of her family's world, Charlotte discovered a different kind of faith, one that believed the revolution could be redeemed, purified from its corruption. It was this faith that would drive her to murder. Charlotte belonged, at least in spirit, to the Girondins, the moderate revolutionaries who had dreamed of reform without terror. They had spoken of law, of reason, of restraint. But by the summer of 1793, they had been silenced by the radical Jacobins, led by men who saw compromise as betrayal. Chief among their instruments was Jean-Paul Marat, the journalist whose words burned hotter than any torch. From his sickbed and his bath, Marat filled the streets with names of those marked for death. His newspaper, L'Ami du Peuple, had become the scripture of the mob. To his followers, he was the voice of the revolution. To Charlotte, he was its disease. The hatred she felt was not personal. She had never met Marat, yet his words reached her like poison in the air. His lists condemned her friends. His ink drowned the last voices of moderation. In Caen, where she found refuge among exiled Girondins, she watched their despair grow. Each dawn brought news of another execution in Paris. They whispered of escape, of surrender. But Charlotte listened and found clarity. If one man's words could destroy a nation, then perhaps one blade could save it. She believed she could be the instrument of balance, the invisible hand that would cleanse France of its fever. In her mind, she would not be a killer, but a physician amputating the gangrene that threatened the body of liberty. Historians would later call her calmness uncanny. There was no trace of frenzy in her letters, no thirst for glory. She wrote of duty, of destiny, of sacrifice. On July 9th, she left Normandy alone. The journey to Paris was long and hot, the roads lined with soldiers and beggars, the air thick with the rot of fear. She carried a small bag, a change of clothes, and the conviction that she would save the Republic with her own hands. She knew she would die for it. That knowledge did not frighten her. It steadied her. When she arrived in Paris, the city reeked of paranoia. The revolution had begun to consume its own children. Danton whispered of moderation. Robespierre preached virtue through death. And the people, exhausted by hunger and propaganda, watched each new execution with hollow eyes. Charlotte found a cheap lodging near the marketplace. The landlord thought her plain and harmless, another provincial woman come to seek work. But at night she wrote letters in a careful hand, letters addressed to the man who haunted her thoughts, Marat. She claimed she had knowledge of traitors in Caen, hoping to lure him into meeting her. Twice her requests were ignored, but the revolution thrived on betrayal, and the third letter opened the door. July 13th was a suffocating day. The city steamed in its own sweat. Behind shuttered windows, rumors twisted like smoke. In a narrow house on the Rue des Cordeliers, Marat lay half submerged in his bath, his body eaten by disease, his mind sharpened by rage. He scrawled notes while servants moved quietly through the heat. They admitted the woman who claimed to bear secrets. She entered the chamber and found him surrounded by papers, his skin pale as wax, the air heavy with vinegar and decay. He was not the monster she had imagined, only a broken man who had built an empire of words from within a tomb of water. What followed lasted only seconds. The blade flashed once. Marat's body convulsed. The water turned red, and the voice that had ordered thousands of deaths went silent. There were no cries of triumph, no words at all, only the hiss of the dying candle and the slow darkening of the room. Charlotte stood over him, her breathing steady, as if she had merely completed a ritual already written in heaven. When the guards burst in, they found her motionless. She offered no struggle, no plea, only the serenity of someone who believed her soul already judged. That moment divided France. Within hours, the news had spread through the city like fire through straw. Marat was dead, slain by a woman. The shock was almost sacred. Crowds gathered before his house, muttering prayers, demanding vengeance. Some whispered that she had been possessed, others that she had acted for the royalists. But the truth was far simpler and far more terrifying. She had acted alone, guided by a conscience untouched by doubt. Her knife had not just killed a man, it had shattered the illusion that the revolution was invincible. At the prison of the Conciergerie, Charlotte waited in silence. Interrogators came and went, trying to drag confessions from her calm. She spoke little. To her, the act needed no justification. She had struck at tyranny, not the tyranny of kings, but the tyranny of those who claimed to be the people's saviors. Outside, Paris turned Marat's death into resurrection. His corpse was paraded through the streets like that of a saint. His blood was called sacred. Mothers pressed their children's hands to his coffin. The painter Jacques-Louis David immortalized him as the Christ of the Revolution, a martyr whose last breath was sacrifice for the Republic. Yet in the shadows, the myth of Charlotte Corday grew beside his, the dark reflection of his sanctity. Whispers spread that she had smiled at the blade, that her calm was unnatural, that no mortal woman could face death so serenely. Some said she was an angel sent by heaven, others, a demon of aristocratic revenge. But historians agree this was only rumor. The truth was colder. She had found peace in conviction. What cannot be disputed, however, is that her composure frightened her judges more than her crime. Her trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was crowded with citizens hungry to see the monster unveiled. She stood in white, her face pale beneath the torchlight, her expression distant. The prosecutors accused her of conspiracy, of betrayal, of madness. None of it mattered. The sentence had been written before she entered the room. Death by guillotine. The same justice she believed she had purified. In the hours before her execution, she wrote her final words, a brief note to her father, asking his forgiveness and blessing. She claimed no regret. In her eyes, she had given France a chance to heal. Yet the irony was merciless. By killing the voice of the terror, she had created its symbol. The death of Marat ignited a new wave of purges. The revolution grew darker, more devout in its bloodlust. The blade she despised grew sharper still. On July 17, 1793, the cart carried her through the streets toward the Place de la Révolution. The red chemise of a murderer clung to her shoulders, a mark of shame that looked to many like martyrdom. The crowd followed, some cursing, others watching in uneasy silence. She moved with the same calm that had defined every step of her journey. At the foot of the scaffold, the air was thick with heat and silence. The guillotine gleamed like a sun of steel. They say she looked to the sky as the blade fell. No scream, no struggle, only the quiet surrender of a soul that had long accepted its fate. Some claimed that when her head was lifted before the crowd, the executioner struck it, and her cheeks flushed as if in protest. Yet many believe this is a myth rather than documented fact. The true record shows that her death, like her life, was marked by eerie composure. Even those who condemned her whispered of her courage. In the aftermath, her image divided the world she left behind. To the Jacobins, she was a serpent, the embodiment of treason. To the Girondins, she was liberty incarnate, the Roman ideal reborn in a French heart. Artists painted her as both assassin and angel, a paradox that the revolution itself could not resolve. For a brief moment, she had held the balance of France in her hands, and when the knife struck, it cut through far more than flesh. It revealed the sickness at the core of virtue itself. Charlotte Corday did not survive her act, yet she endured beyond it. Her name became a whisper of conscience in every age that followed, the question of whether purity can exist without blood, whether freedom can be born without sin. She had set out to destroy a monster, but history left her entwined with him forever, like shadow and flame. In Marat's death, she created not salvation, but a mirror, reflecting the revolution's own hunger back upon itself. The years passed, and France continued to kill in the name of virtue. The terror consumed its creators, the guillotine devoured the men who had once glorified it, and the streets grew quiet at last. Yet Charlotte's story remained, suspended between damnation and sainthood. Her grave was unmarked, her bones forgotten. But her legend, the calm, pale woman with a knife hidden beneath her shawl, survived every empire that rose from the ruins. Even now, her image lingers in the collective memory of that fevered century, a flicker of candlelight upon bloodied water, a lone figure stepping through the door of history to silence a man who could not be reasoned with. She killed him where he was weakest, and for that, her act was both tragic and cruel. But in the darkness of that act, she believed she had given light. Charlotte Corday's name endures not because she was right, nor because she was wrong, but because she stood alone against the tide and made the world look at itself. Her knife ended a life, but her conviction revealed the cost of every revolution, the moment when justice becomes indistinguishable from vengeance. Paris never forgot the sound of that silence after the blade fell. It was the sound of a nation seeing its reflection and recoiling from what it saw,